The president's national security advisor, Susan Rice, is defending her remarks about Sergeant Bo Bergdahl's honor, even as questions arise about the circumstances surrounding his capture by the Taliban in 2009.
I realize there's been a lot of discussion and controversy around this, but what I was referring to is the fact that this was a young man who volunteered to serve his country in uniform at a time of war. That is itself a very honorable thing.
But honor and distinction.
Jim, really, I mean, this is a young man whose circumstances we are still going to learn about.
Now, Rice goes on to say, like all Americans, Sergeant Bergdahl is innocent until proven guilty, but first he must recover. Meanwhile, larger diplomatic questions have also been raised about the Bergdahl handover and what it means as the war in Afghanistan winds down. Reporter Ann Guerin has been covering this story in detail for the Washington Post, and we're delighted to have Ann join us now. And with a welcome to you, you just heard Susan Rice defending her previous comments about Sergeant Bergdahl. Do you think there's an element of regret using the words honor and specifically distinction in her original statement?
Well, she might choose different words now. I think she explained, as you just heard there, that what she really meant was that by signing up to volunteering for combat duty in Afghanistan, he had performed an honorable act as a soldier. She's leaving out whether he then deserted his post and potentially renounced his American citizenship or ties to America in various communications home, communications to other soldiers in his unit. So the criticism of Bergdahl himself has centered on who he was, how he left his unit, the kinds of things he said about Afghanistan, about service there, about America. And that is where the White House has really had some areas of vulnerability this week, is trying to simultaneously say he is an American soldier. We had been taken prisoner by the enemy, period. We have to get him out. That's what we do. And also trying to sort of to skip ahead and say, we're going to have to deal with who he was and whether he was a deserter later.
Yeah. And this morning I spoke with former Guantanamo Bay prosecutor Colonel Morris Davis, and here's what he had to say about these 5 traded Taliban detainees. Let's listen to that.
When I saw the names of the 5 individuals when they were reported last weekend, my first reaction was, who are they? I never saw the names before, which meant there was not enough information to even make it onto our list of potential prosecution. So when you hear people talk about these guys being the hardest of the hardcore and how dangerous they are, you know, we prosecuted Osama bin Laden's driver, and we couldn't even bring charges against these guys.
So the colonel says they're not high risk. The White House seems to agree with that. What are you hearing?
Well, there are a couple of important things to remember about these guys. They are incredibly important to the Taliban and to the Taliban high command. They were a big part of the Taliban high command at the time of the U.S. invasion in 2001 and in a couple of cases shortly thereafter. But they've all been locked up in Guantanamo for more than 10 years, and some of them they've been locked up longer than that. They've been off the battlefield. They've been out of communication with other Taliban figures. They are much older now, and so their departure from Guantanamo is not the same thing as their return to the bosom of the Taliban. But to say that they are insignificant, no, they're not insignificant. They're very significant to the Taliban itself.
Diplomatically speaking, what's the read on Capitol Hill? Is there a lot of backlash there? Is it purely political, or is there real anger there?
There's real anger, mostly on the point of Congress being cut out of this, which the administration acknowledges they did, and they say that it was because the exigency of Bergdahl's life might be at risk if they didn't move quickly. The backstory of that, as I've learned it, is basically this: the Taliban didn't issue an outright death threat that said, we'll kill him if these talks don't move swiftly or leave. week, but U.S. intelligence believed that to be a significant risk. It wasn't like there was some, we got to have him out by Tuesday or he's dead kind of threat. But nonetheless, U.S. intelligence told the White House, we have to move quickly. We cannot wait 30 days from the time that we shake hands on a deal or whatever the verbal agreement was in Qatar until he walks out. During that 30 days, he's at too big a risk. So that's one thing. Congress is mad about that. But then there's this whole other separate issue of, was this a bad deal? Did we trade a traitor for terrorists?
Well, as you ask these questions, Ann, do you think that we're in for a summer of hearings called for by the GOP to try to answer these questions?
At least some June and July of it, yes. And during that time, we may actually get some answers from Bergdahl himself. He will eventually recover well enough to leave the hospital in Landstuhl, Germany, go to Texas, an Army base there, for further recovery. And at some point, the Army will decide whether he is left his post dishonorably and what to do with him.
Here's something that you write in the Washington Post, and it goes, Bergdahl's return is not, as originally envisioned, a step toward a larger U.S. bargain with the Taliban and the Afghan government. Instead, it represented the last major piece of unfinished Taliban business for the United States as it winds down 13 years of combat. So once the U.S. is gone, Ann, does the situation there return to a pre-2001 scenario where the terrorists run the show?
Well, certainly the elected Afghan government hopes not, and the United States, as its friend and supporter, hopes not as well. During the time that the U.S. military has been the sheriff in Afghanistan, we've had 10 years of elected government, and there's now a peaceful election going on to replace Hamid Karzai as president. The Taliban will have a harder time arguing that it is fighting the infidels when they have the situation they will face in Afghanistan next year, which is an elected government and the departure of U.S. combat forces. They are not going away as an insurgency, but certainly their political argument and their political circumstances will be very different.
Is it plausible, Ann, that these 149 detainees that remain in Guantanamo Bay will, despite President Obama's campaign promises and promises throughout his administration, he will leave office after 8 years with some of these guys still behind bars?
I think the White House is worried that that's a possibility. They would like to resolve this, but the closer you get, maybe below 100, you get down to the people who are just such hard cases, either because they are unprosecutable or they are functionally homeless. There's no country in the world that will take them, and those are we've been getting to that hard nut, and we're really almost upon it now. One funny thing that's come out of this whole situation is that these 5 guys were among the unprosecutables, and now they're out. I don't think the White House would make the same deal for anybody else, but at least they're down 5.
Yeah. Okay. Ann Guerin with the Washington Post. Thanks so much. Good to see you.
Thank you.
California Chrome is getting ready to shine. A look at what's at stake when Belmont Park gets going there. There's a live look. We'll be right back.